The Scott Jennings Show is proudly sponsored by Lear Capital. Since 1997, Lear has helped Americans protect their retirement accounts and savings with physical gold and silver. With thousands of five-star reviews and $3 billion in transactions, Lear is who I trust to help me buy gold and silver. Visit LearScott.com.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Hegseth and Kane briefing the media on Operation Epic Fury. We have the latest from both of them. An NBA player is released from his team for espousing Christian views. We'll talk about that later in the show with Sage Steele. A judge in Minnesota drawing outrage after letting a Somali fraudster off very easy. And you've heard of the Epstein files, but here comes the Swallwell files. We'll tell you all about that. It is Tuesday, March 31st. You're listening to Common Sense for the American People. I'm Scott Jennings, broadcasting for Salem, and we are live today in New York City. By the way, 4 o'clock Eastern today. You can catch me on CNN on the Arena, and then I'll be back on Newsnight with Abby Phillip tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern. And we begin our broadcast today with the news, and the video is a sight to behold if you're watching on snc.tv or on Roku or on one of the many streaming services where you can now watch this broadcast. You can hopefully see the fireball climbing high into the Iranian night sky above Isfahan, where the United States hit a large ammunition depot overnight with several 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs. Now, Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane briefed the media about all of this morning, and he laid out the accomplishments of Operation Epic Fury so far. Here is Cut 3A.
Given the increase in air superiority, we've successfully started to conduct the first overland B-52 missions, which allow us, as we've said before, to continue to get on top of the enemy and, as the Secretary talked about, switch towards more and more dynamic targets, servicing mobile targets around the battle space. We've continued to do the work against Iran's missile, drone, and naval production facilities, and we continue the multi-domain pressure that we've talked about.
General Kane says we have hit 11,000 targets so far. Alongside him at the podium today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who refused to take the bait from the media on whether the president would rule out putting U.S. boots on the ground. Here is Secretary Hegseth.
As far as President Trump and boots on the ground, I don't understand why the base, which they have already, they understand, wouldn't have faith in his ability to execute on this. Look at his track record of pursuing peace through strength, America first outcomes. What he's simply saying, and it's exactly true, and I've said from this podium too, we're not going to foreclose any option. You can't fight and win a war if you tell your adversary what you are willing to do or what you are not willing to do, to include boots on the ground.
Now, one thing is clear right now. There is a disconnect between the Democrats and their partners in the American media and the American people when it comes to who is winning this war. Now, the latest Harvard-Harris poll was issued yesterday. Let me read you some of the results. 76% of Americans say the U.S. is currently winning the war. 64% say Iran violated its nuclear deal. 62% view Iran as a direct U.S. national security threat. 67% say Iran is a leading source of instability, terrorism, and war. 68% believe the Iranian people do not support the current regime. 73% support Israel over Hamas, and overall, 51% of Americans support U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, while 54% say the campaign is justified. Now, compare all of that to what you hear in the mainstream media every day, and from Democrats who say there is no clear mission and that everything that happens means, well, Iran is winning and they're getting stronger. It's almost like there's a group of people out there in Western media who are wish-casting bad outcomes for the American military, all because they hate Donald Trump, the duly elected commander-in-chief. Now, the truth is, we are winning, and the American people know it. More news today. California Congressman and gubernatorial candidate Eric Swallwell has some explaining to do when it comes to FBI files and whether they should be released. After repeatedly slandering Donald Trump and calling for the release of the Epstein files, which, by the way, show no wrongdoing on Trump's part, Swallwell is now singing a different tune when it comes to his own past. It turns out there's a bunch of FBI files related to Swallwell's relationship with a Chinese spy, a young female spy, I might add, and he is desperately trying to keep them from becoming public. Attorneys for Swallwell sent a letter yesterday to FBI Director Kash Patel demanding that he keep secret files that detail Swallwell's relationship with the spy. There has been some reporting that the FBI is planning to release these documents to the public. Now, Swallwell and his lawyers say he has done nothing wrong, which begs the question, why then are they so worried about transparency? Is Swallwell unwilling to hold himself to the same standard as President Trump, who signed a law authorizing the release of the entire Epstein file? My view, we're living in an era of transparency. Perhaps Mr. Swallwell ought to just embrace it for himself, as he has demanded it so passionately for others. Providence, Rhode Island, a mural honoring Irina Zarutska, the young Ukrainian refugee who was brutally murdered on a train, is now under fire from Democrats there. The mayor of Providence calls it divisive, and he wants it taken down. And this state representative here, named David Morales, says honoring this murder victim runs afoul of local values. Let's take a listen to Mr. Morales.
Ultimately, we want to make sure that every community member that calls Providence home feels safe, and we can both agree that this mural behind us does not reflect Providence's values, nor does it reflect the creativity that we want to see in our city.
Now, think about that for just a moment. A memorial to a murder victim is now controversial and doesn't reflect Providence values. What are the values in Providence? That violent criminals are the heroes and that their victims are the villains? You know, we are often told that art should provoke and challenge, but that's just until it challenges the wrong narrative. Then art becomes a problem. Now, young Irina Zarutska was murdered by a violent criminal who had been released onto the streets by a Democrat. So talking about it now, I guess, is a big no-no. Of course, there are George Floyd murals and statues all over the country. If your art reinforces the liberal worldview, it's celebrated. In fact, you're required to love it, to praise it. You will be made to care. It will be shoved down your throat, whether you like it or not. But if your art raises uncomfortable questions about crime, public safety, or policy failures of Democrats, well, it gets labeled divisive, and the left then comes to erase it. Now, remember, Irina Zarutska's killer was out of jail after 14 arrests, thanks to the soft-on-crime policies of a Democratic governor of North Carolina named Roy Cooper, who now wants to be a U.S. senator from the Tar Heel state. Now, this mural in Providence, you must realize, didn't cross a line. It crossed a narrative. And when you live in a blue state or a blue city, that is the one thing that you are not allowed to do. The Department of Homeland Security remains shut down today. The longest government shutdown in history started back on February the 14th. Some are speculating that it could last for months more as Democrats remain locked in on their views about immigration enforcement and the fact that, well, they don't want any of it. We'll see what happens when Congress comes back to town in a couple of weeks. A U.S. Supreme Court ruling popped out this morning, 8-1, tossing out a Colorado law regarding gender therapy. The law essentially banned therapists from telling boys that they are, in fact, boys, and girls that they are, in fact, girls. The case pitted the state of Colorado against a counselor named Kaylee Childs, who said that the law violated her First Amendment rights and prevented her from accepting several clients. It's Common Sense for the American People. I'm Scott Jennings. When we come back after this break, the ladies of The View have outdone themselves. Is this their most deranged, incoherent take ever? That's a high bar. We have the audio, and I'll give you my take when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Common sense for the American people. Stay with us.
Scott Jennings for Crowd Health. I want you to imagine an accident that turns into a helicopter ride, multiple hospital stays, rehab, weeks of doctor's visits, and high bills. Well, that's what happened to Michael, who is a member of Crowd Health. And man, did those costs add up fast. Michael was fishing in Montana. He had a gun on him. It slipped, and it accidentally discharged. Suffice to say, he got a serious injury. All the surgeries and the hospital stays added up, and he kept running through his mind this question: how much is all this going to cost me? That's where Crowd Health stepped in. They negotiated Michael's medical bills down, significantly down. It saved him thousands of dollars. When's the last time your traditional insurance company did anything like that for you? Probably never. To hear Michael's full story, go to joincrowdhealth.com, and you can get started for just $99 a month for your first 3 months using the code SCOTT. Go to joincrowdhealth.com, code SCOTT. Crowd Health's not traditional insurance. You can opt out anytime and take your power back. This is how we win.
When he's not in the Oval Office or owning the libs on CNN, he's here with us. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Tuesday, March 31st. Quick note for our listeners over in the Cleveland area. Salem Radio is heading to Cleveland for opening day on Friday, April 3rd, and we're partnering with Indian Motorcycle, which is an iconic American brand, and we're hosting a VIP tailgate. If you show up in your Cleveland Indians gear, not your Guardians, but your Cleveland Indians gear, you'll be entered to win a spot on our Gulf of America cruise. If you want more details about all of this, go to this website, bringindiansback.com. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Common sense for the American people. You know, we often marvel around here at what happens on The View, the daytime talk show over on ABC TV, known for its low IQ takes and the frequency with which ABC's lawyers force the co-host to read retractions so that they don't get sued into oblivion. But yesterday just might have been the worst showing in the show's history. Co-host Sunny Hostin led a deranged discussion about why women in America should no longer have children. Take a listen to this in cut number 11.
And I think it's just really reckless to be suggesting that people should have children when you now know in this country there's this affordability crisis, and for a two-person household, a married household, you need over $400,000 for childcare. Over $400,000. Most people don't make over $400,000. So she's advocating for people to be born into poverty, people not being able to feed those children, people not being able to educate those children, and people not being able to house those children at the same time when this government is cutting all of the services that would allow people to have families and big families and children.
So, first of all, Sunny Hostin thinks it costs $400,000 per year for child care in America. I mean, honestly, that is just deranged. It doesn't cost that much anywhere in America to take care of a child for 1 year. Literally nowhere does it cost $400,000. But not to be outdone, here comes Whoopi. Cut number 12.
You want to talk to some of those red states about some of their laws about women, because they're not really encouraging women to do anything except flee from them.
I hate to break it to Whoopi, but all of the migration in this country is going away from blue states and toward red states. Why is that? Freedom, affordability, lower taxes, more jobs, better schools. Shall I keep going? Look, I watch this stuff so that you don't have to. And honestly, there is more to this back and forth, but I'm not going to play it because it is the most incoherent babbling I have ever heard aloud on television. It is incredible to me that ABC permits these deranged psychopaths to go on television and lie to the American people every day about things like, I don't know, the cost of childcare. It does not cost $400,000 a year. Sunny Hostin, by the way, has 2 kids, private schools, Ivy Leaguers. She's very proud of it. But she apparently doesn't want you to have kids. She doesn't want you to experience the joy of parenthood. Why? Well, because Donald Trump is the president. let's be honest. This entire incoherent rant comes down to, as it always does, Donald Trump. The broken-brained liberal mind today says, don't have kids in America because, well, we lost an election. And it serves the overall progressive worldview that preaches that nuclear families are bad, that they are oppressive, especially to women. Of course, the happiest women in America, according to polling, are married women with children. But if you want to understand the modern left, it's quite simple. They don't want you to build anything permanent, not wealth, not faith, and certainly not a family, because permanent things are harder to control. So if you are, in fact, defying Sonny Hostin and having kids out there or planning to have kids, good for you. But please, 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 raise them right, because this country is going to need them. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. I have a quick note about the cruise. I mentioned it at the top of the block. I'll mention it at the end. The Gulf of America cruise coming up in November of this year. Mike Gallagher and I heading out into the Gulf of America to celebrate our 250th anniversary of our country. If you want to get your cabin, which I highly recommend, text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. We'd love to see you out there. We are going to take a break, but when we come back, our first guest of the day, Major League Baseball superstar turned political candidate in Texas, Mark Teixeira, is here. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us. You know, gold and silver recently soared to record highs and then pulled back. So are precious metals still a good buy? Many Wall Street experts predict higher prices ahead. Why? Well, because we still have trillions in national debt, a declining dollar, and inflation that keeps shrinking our savings. Even with corrections along the way, gold remains a historical hedge for wealth protection. That's why Morgan Stanley's chief investment officer ditched the 60-40 stocks and bonds portfolio and is recommending up to 20% in precious metals. They're getting educated, and you should too. Call Lear Capital at 1-800-880-2424 for your free gold investment kit and learn how you could qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus gold. Lear Capital has over $3 billion in transactions and thousands of five-star reviews. Call 1-800-880-2424, 1-800-880-2424, or visit learscott.com.
Freedom to speak clearly with no leftist lunacy. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Tuesday, March 31st, broadcasting live from New York City today. Thanks for listening to Common Sense for the American People. I'm Scott Jennings. Down in Texas, a former Major League Baseball player is one step closer to Congress after beating out 11 contenders in the Republican primary in the 21st Congressional District. You might have heard of this man. Let's listen to Cut 13.
And the pitch. High drive, right center, going back, Bradley, track, wall, see ya! A walk-off grand slam for Mark Teixeira, and the Yankees snatch victory from the Red Sox, and they win this one 5-3. Oh, try to understand this game. And the Yankees put a 5 spot on the board, and they win this one by a score of 5-3.
Apologies to our listeners in Boston. Mark Teixeira won his primary in Texas 21 with nearly 61% of the vote. He avoids a runoff, by the way, and he now faces the Democrat Kristen Hook in November. This seat, by the way, is currently held by Republican Chip Roy, who has represented the district since 2018. Chip is now running for Attorney General of Texas and himself is now in a runoff that will be in May. And my guest today is Mark Teixeira. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show, Mark. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
I wanted to play that clip, Mark. I hesitated because I didn't want to cause you any fundraising trouble over in Boston. but it had to be done. It had to be done today.
I appreciate it. I don't think I've raised a lot of money in Boston anyway, Scott, so I think we're okay.
Okay. Well, I have to ask you, this is your first run for political office. You're jumping from the world of sports and sports broadcasting into politics. What caused you to want to do it? Politics are rough business, but you're doing quite well so far. Talk about that jump into politics.
Yeah, Scott, the quick answer is I've always loved this country, and this country is worth fighting for. We've never needed different types of leaders more than we do today. I truly believe that career politicians and bureaucrats have ruined Washington, D.C. And, we're in a very critical time in this country. I have been extremely blessed in my life. God has given me an incredible family, a great baseball career, a great business career. And I read the Bible every single day. It doesn't say, have a great career, raise your family, and then go on vacation. The Bible calls us to serve. And so from my standpoint, this is an opportunity for me to serve my country and serve my God and serve the people of the Texas 21st District, who I respect so much.
Talk about the district. This is Texas 21. It's a big state. What are the major cities in the district, and what are the major issues, local issues, that you'll be focusing on when you make it to Congress?
So our district, as you mentioned, this is Chip Roy's district. Texas 21 stretches from southwest Austin down to northern San Antonio. It gets that I-35 corridor, which is one of the fastest growing regions of Texas. And then it moves west into Texas Hill Country. It is the most beautiful district in Texas. Sorry to all of my Republican colleagues across the state, but the Texas Hill Country is absolutely gorgeous. A lot of people in this district are dealing with issues, water issues. They're dealing with infrastructure issues because of the amount of growth that we have. They don't want, battery storage facilities. They don't want data centers. They don't want all of these things that maybe are coming to Texas because Texas is growing. They want to make sure that we are growing at the right pace, and we manage that growth properly.
Now, you got the endorsement of President Trump very early on. Did you have a pre-existing relationship with the president? Was getting his support critical to your decision to get into the race?
I had met President Trump one time back in the day at Yankee Stadium, and we'd had a lot of mutual friends, given my time in New York with the Yankees, but we didn't really have a relationship. And I spent a long time with his staff during the few months of my campaign before I got the endorsement, and really just letting them know what type of candidate I would be, what type of congressman I would be. And so when President Trump came in and ended up endorsing my campaign, that was really, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back of my opponents, because I'd been running a really good race. No one outworked me during my primary. We raised a lot of money, met a lot of people. But then when President Trump endorsed, along with Governor Abbott, he had endorsed earlier in the campaign, it really showed that I had support from all over the country for my race.
Now let's talk about some current events. As you know, the Department of Homeland Security remains shut down. It has been shut down since February the 14th. And we've had ongoing issues with the TSA, although President Trump did get them paid on Monday, and he did deploy ICE to the airports, which appears to have alleviated some of the pressure so far. But this is now the longest shutdown of any government agency in our nation's history. Are you hearing about this from people out in Texas 21? And obviously, as you know, the issue really here is immigration enforcement. The impasse is Democrats don't want any. Republicans would like to have some, and that's really the bright line that's causing this shutdown. Is this bubbling up in your conversations with voters?
It is, Scott, and people are so frustrated. They have had it with Congress. They really have. And it's one of the reasons that they want an outsider is that people that have been in Congress too long tend to forget that the American people don't work for them. They work for the American people. And it's very frustrating to me that Democrats know that the American people elected a Republican president, elected a Republican Senate, and a Republican House of Representatives. We have the ability to shape the legislation for the next few years because we won the elections. Democrats in Washington have said, I don't care what the American people think. I don't care what the election said. We are going to jam down the throats of Congress our priorities, which is defund ICE and making sure that the American people are paying the price when Democrats don't get what they want. So folks in Texas 21 are just so frustrated that we can't get government open. And I personally don't believe if you shut down government, you shouldn't get paid. And I certainly wouldn't want to be somebody sitting in Congress today collecting a paycheck when TSA or other members of Homeland Security who are putting their lives on the line every single day to support and protect American people, they're not getting paychecks.
Yeah, not only are they getting paychecks in Congress, they're on vacation right now. They're on a 2-week recess. The Senate recess, the House is gone. It's not clear to me, honestly, Mark, how this is going to be resolved. I'm not certain there are going to be 6 or 7 Democrats over in the Senate that are ever going to vote to fund any kind of immigration enforcement. I know everybody says this election is going to be about the economy and other issues, but do you see the issue of immigration, and are we going to have common sense immigration enforcement? Do you see that still right at the top of the list for voters, or has it faded somewhat because, let's face it, Trump has successfully closed the border?
I think so. Well, you make a great point, and my district really appreciates the fact that President Trump secured the border. We do not have illegals coming in daily like we had under the Biden administration. That being said, we had a winning hand as Republicans closing the border. Unfortunately, with what happened in Minnesota, the Democrats are really good at creating chaos. And when you had two people unfortunately lost their lives in Minnesota, ICE should have never been put in that situation. You should never have people keeping law enforcement from doing their jobs. That being said, it's flipped a little bit now where there's a lot of Republicans that are saying, well, ICE went too far. Immigration enforcement has gone too far. So this is absolutely going to be an issue in November. And if you don't think it is, I think you've got your head in the sand. That being said, your show, your book, it's all about common sense, right? Can we put together common sense enforcement, if you will, because we don't need new laws. We just need common sense enforcement to go after and prioritize the worst of the worst, violent criminals, those that are stealing and perpetuating fraud in the immigration system and in some of our other government agencies and basically stealing from the American people. If we can prioritize those people, making sure they are being taken care of first, they are being deported first, and then figuring out what to do with everybody else down the road, I think that makes the most sense right now, because we have an issue with violent criminals. We have an issue with fraud, waste, and abuse being perpetrated by illegal aliens. That's what we need to be spending most of our time with.
That voice you're hearing is Mark Teixeira, Republican candidate for Congress in Texas 21, former Major League Baseball superstar as well. Mark, I want to ask you quickly about the war in Iran. You're running a campaign at a time of war, and your election will take place in November. We don't know exactly what the situation will be come November or when you would take office in January. And I know you're not in on the intelligence briefings, and neither am I. So let me ask it this way. What is your sort of general disposition when it comes to war and peace, national security, the commitment of U.S. troops to situations like the one we have in Iran? What's your general governing philosophy on these matters?
Number one, I believe in peace through strength. I do not believe in forever wars. I also believe that when you have a regime like Iran, who for 47 years have been sponsoring terrorism all over this world and who chant death to America, we should not let them have a nuclear weapon. And you look at what the Obama administration and the Biden administration allowed the Iranian regime to do and enrich their nuclear facilities to get closer to a nuclear weapon. If Iran has a nuclear weapon, they will use it. They will use it to destroy their enemies all over the world, including Americans. And so from my standpoint, this is a war, this is a conflict that had to happen. We had to make sure that Iran was not going to develop a nuclear weapon, and also needed to let them know that the terror stops. You don't get to terrorize this world, to kill Americans, to execute 30,000 of your own citizens. You don't get to do that and not be punished for it. So I wish we had more allies all over this world that would back us up. I wish Europe would back us up a little bit more than they have been. But from my standpoint, I believe in peace, but we have to show the world that United States of America is not going to be terrorized by any country any longer.
That voice is Mark Teixeira. He's running for Congress in Texas and soon to be captain of the Republican Conference baseball team when he makes it to Washington in January. Mark, thanks for joining us. Great to get to meet you over the last few weeks, and good luck on your race down in Texas. We got to take a break here on the Scott Jennings Show. When we come back, we have more breaking news, more analysis. You don't want to miss a thing here on Salem. It's Scott Jennings. Stay with me.
The man who made CNN safe for conservatives again. Here's Scott Jennings.
Rounding out the first hour here on Tuesday, March 31st, joining the show, Kent Strang, Managing Director of Americans for Prosperity. Kent's been a leader behind several key campaigns that AFP has undertaken. And most importantly, Kent is a fellow St. Louis Cardinals fan. He comes to us today from O'Fallon, Illinois. Kent, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Great to be with you, Scott. Thanks for having me. Go Cards.
Go Cards. I love seeing those. I know those are Yadier Molina game-used bats behind you, so I love seeing that, and glad to have you on the show today. Let's talk about what's going on at AFP. I know you guys are launching a new phase of advocacy efforts around supporting what happened last summer with the big, beautiful bill that Trump signed into law last 4th of July. Tell us about this new campaign to support the big, beautiful bill. Tell us about the policy initiatives contained therein that you think will resonate most with the American people.
That's right. Tax Day is a great opportunity to remind Americans of the benefits of the big, beautiful bill, the working families tax cuts. Scott, we all felt the pain of Bidenomics, rampant inflation. Those policies cost the average American family $11,400 more. And this bill really rights a lot of those wrongs. There was an open border. This bill funded border security. There was wasteful spending. This bill cut $1.5 trillion in spending. This bill also stopped the biggest tax hike in American history. Filers, when they file their taxes, are going to see an average of $3,700 back in their pocketbook so they can spend as they see fit, not how Uncle Sam sees fit. And so it's a great reminder for Americans that pro-growth tax policies are good for Americans rather than sending it all to Washington.
Ken, it seems to me there's a bit of a disconnect between what the American people are experiencing with the tax season, because the refunds are up. People realize what's happening here, but you don't get a lot of it out of the mainstream media. It seems to be a little bit of, I think, suppression of the good news that came along with all these tax cuts. But I think, to me, that's where Americans for Prosperity really steps in, because what you're not getting from the mainstream media, you would get from an organization like AFP in direct contact with voters, yes?
That's exactly right, Scott. We talk to Americans every single day, whether it's through traditional ads and digital ads, but also directly at their doorstep on their phone call. We've started working on this campaign for over a year to talk to Americans about these tax cuts and making sure that President Trump's 2017 tax cuts didn't expire and they were extended. We've talked to over 1.5 million Americans at their doorstep. We've talked to almost 1 million Americans on the phone, and we've had over 1,200 events to talk about the benefits of pro-growth tax reform. And so while you may not hear it on your TV, at Americans for Prosperity, we're going to go door to door and talk to real American families about the impact that these tax cuts make. And that's part of that next phase. We're going to take it across the country, events across America, so people can hear how these impact their lives.
Ken, you've been involved in a lot of campaigns and grassroots efforts over time. Of course, the political communications landscape is changing. Is it your opinion that good old-fashioned grassroots campaigning, door-knocking, telephone calls, hand-to-hand stuff, is it your opinion that is still an effective way to communicate with folks in a campaign?
I absolutely believe it. I think that so many people want human connection. They want to hear it from a friend. They want to hear it from a neighbor, a trusted source. You can hear anything that you want to make your point on the internet, but neighbors are still a trusted source. And that's what I think we do best at Americans for Prosperity. We take our message directly to voters, directly to friends and neighbors. We knock on their door every single day. We reach them on the phone every single day. We have events. I think that's what makes us unique. We have chapters and full-time staff all across the country to do exactly that. Again, we've knocked on over 1.5 million doors just on this issue alone, and it doesn't stop there. From local school board races all the way to the U.S. Senate, AFP is probably in a neighborhood near you talking to voters about the issues that you care most about.
Kent, what are some of the big states you plan to focus on this year? We've got about 30 seconds. Give you the last word.
Sure, we're going to be all across the country, but it's in the most targeted congressional districts across the nation where people need to hear these messages that the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, helps improve their lives. And we also need to drive accountability. Where there are members that chose to have the biggest tax hike in American history, they need to hear about that too, that you voted for higher taxes, the biggest tax hikes in American history, rather than voting for more money in American people's pockets. They need to hear that from folks too. And so hold your member accountable if they didn't vote for this legislation, and give them a pat on the back if they did.
Kent Strang, quickly, the URL, if people want to go online and get involved here, they visit what?
Go to a250.org and visit our One Small Step initiative, or visit americansforprosperity.org to get involved with us.
That's Kent Strang with AFP. I'm Scott Jennings with Salem. Hour number 1 is in the books. We'll take a break. Hour number 2 coming up next. Stay with us here on Common Sense for the American People. All right, it's Tuesday, March 31st. We'll give you a quick check of the headlines here. The Pentagon offered up a media briefing this morning on Operation Epic Fury and on the fury that is, in fact, raining down on Iran. Our elite military has absolutely obliterated the Iranian Navy. It is the largest elimination of a Navy over a 3-week period since World War II. Here's Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane about the American naval dominance. Cut 3B.
Second, on the Navy front, we continue to assert dominance over the Iranian Navy. We remain focused on targeting their mine-laying capability, their naval assets, and we've now, as I mentioned briefly last time, started to work attack helicopters and other close air support assets into the naval domain. CENTCOM continues to identify and work against naval depots and storage areas. And we've taken out, again, more than 150 ships, including all Jamaran-class frigates inside their Navy.
The Department of Homeland Security remains shut down today, and it looks like it's going to be shut down for the foreseeable future as the House and the Senate cannot come to an agreement on what to do next. House Speaker Mike Johnson remains very upset with how the Senate handled its business last week. He was on Fox this morning. Let's listen to the Speaker in Cut 15.
Well, they sent the bill in the dead of night. It was about a 2:30 a.m. vote, and it came to us right before everyone was scheduled to go home. We passed the bill, the full funding bill, a CR, for 8 weeks, clean, nonpartisan, no tricks on that at all, just to keep the whole Department of Homeland Security funded for 8 weeks so the parties can work out the differences. We thought that would be passed by unanimous consent on Monday, and it didn't happen in the Senate. And so we've got a dilemma. The outrage, and the reason we were so upset, Lawrence, is because they sent us a bill that literally put the number 0 in the bill for the funding of border security and customs and immigration enforcement. We can't do that. That was the biggest issue in the 2024 election, and it's outrageous to us.
Seems like the pressure at America's airports has alleviated somewhat this week. President Trump got the TSA agents paid on Monday via an executive order and the declaration of a national emergency, and he has sent ICE agents to airports, a tactic that has clearly worked. We'll see what the House and the Senate decide to do when they come back from the Easter recess. Now, a few weeks ago, U.S. Senator Steve Daines of Montana shocked Washington when he announced his retirement, but things developed quickly, and the Republican Party out there has coalesced around a replacement named Kurt Alme, who served as U.S. Attorney in President Trump's first and second term. He stepped down from that post in March to take up electoral politics, and he is the odds-on favorite to replace Senator Daines in Washington. Joining me now, Kurt Alme. Welcome into the Scott Jennings Show. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Scott. Good afternoon. Good to be on the show with you.
Yeah, glad you're here. Now, you were an appointee of President Trump, and you were confirmed twice by the United States Senate, but now you're looking to be confirmed by the voters out there in Montana. What made you decide to jump into this race and try to get to Washington, D.C. in elected capacity?
God, I'm just honored to have gotten the president's nomination twice to be United States Attorney and now his endorsement in the Senate race. There's a lot of work to do in Washington. As you know, we want to make life more affordable for people in this country and people in this state. We want to make our communities safer. And out here in Montana, we want to be sure we do that while protecting our Montana way of life. And I have experience in those areas to hopefully get those things done.
Kurt, it seems quite likely to me you are going to be a United States Senator come this time next year. So tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your family and sort of what led you into the career of public service, ultimately becoming U.S. Attorney and a prosecutor, putting bad guys in jail.
Yeah, native Montanan, Scott. I grew up all over this state and graduated high school from Miles City, which is out in eastern Montana cattle country. My wife and I live in Billings, where we've raised our two kids. As far as my background, I've dedicated my life to public service as a prosecutor and also as a state budget director and director of the Department of Revenue. And then also spent a lot of time in the nonprofit world as a nonprofit leader, president of a Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch Foundation, which supports the ranch, which works with about 600 mentally ill kids every day, and also done a lot of volunteer work with our community organizations. So there's a lot of work here to be done. Proud to be the common sense candidate endorsed by the president. And we're going to fight for fiscal responsibility, public safety, and like I said, try to protect our Montana values and put America first.
I want to talk about this issue of public safety. It seems to me that this is going to be one of the biggest issues in campaigns, not just in Montana, but across the country. You have Democrats out there doing two things right now, which most people think are outrageous. One is coddling violent illegal aliens, and two is they're on a campaign dedicated to let violent criminals out of jail as much as possible. You've been U.S. Attorney. You've been on the front lines of trying to put violent people in jail and keep them there. Do you intend to focus on this as part of your campaign, and would it be your advice to the Republican Party to focus on this issue this fall?
Absolutely. Yeah, we need to continue to secure the border. The president's done a great job in the first 2 years of securing that southern border, and we need to keep it secure. We have to support law enforcement. This defunding the police is not the right direction to go. We need to back the blue and support law enforcement, and we need to focus on prosecuting violent criminals. As you said, as you pointed out, that needs to be our priority, whether it's illegal aliens or those who come across the border with drug trafficking that's directly related to the cartels. We have to focus on making our community safe, and the only way we can do that is by prosecuting drug traffickers and do what President Trump said, which is go all the way up to the cartels and tear these organizations out by the roots.
You're traveling around Montana right now, meeting voters and asking for their support. Give us an idea. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you're hearing out on the campaign trail? What are people most worried about today?
Well, the 2 things we're focusing our campaign on. There's no coincidence that we're trying to listen to Montana voters and be sure that we respond. What we're hearing about is affordability. Montanans are concerned about the cost of living, and they want to live in a place where inflation is low and they can afford to live the life that they've always lived. And the second is public safety. Again, we've got to deal with the drug trafficking that's driving the violent crime in our communities.
Kurt, you'll be taking office and running a campaign this year at a time of war, taking office next year. We don't know what the situation in the Middle East is going to be this time next year. We pray for the war to be over and for our troops to come home safely. And I recognize you're not in all the briefings and you don't have access to all the intelligence, but generally, talk to us about your disposition when it comes to war and peace, your theories about national security, your attitude when it comes to when it's appropriate to commit U.S. troops to situations like we have with Iran right now.
Yeah, first let me say I support the goals of the president here of trying to set back Iran's nuclear intentions as far back as we can, as well as their ability to export terror around the country. So very pleased to see the president doing what he's done to try to protect us by preemptively dealing with those problems. But I think we're all of us in America want to be sure that if ever we're going to engage militarily around the world, that we have a very compelling reason in our national interest to do so, and that we do it in a way where We know what our objectives are, and we know we're going to win.
Kurt, you've got the president's support. You've got the Republican Party support in Montana. You're close to the governor there, Governor Gianforte. You put together a pretty impressive operation in a short period of time. Talk to us, and I'll give you the last word here, about your conversations with the president. He came out for you pretty strongly. What were some of the things that you talked about that were important to him as you launched this Senate campaign?
Well, again, I've had a relationship with the president as he's nominated me to be United States Attorney twice. So most of my conversations have been about law and order and about backing the blue and about making our community safe. And that's certainly a high priority for the president in his decision to endorse me.
All right, that is Kurt Alme. He is going to be, most likely, although there is an election this year, the next United States Senator from Montana. Senator Daines is retiring, and the Republican Party, both in Montana and in Washington, has coalesced around Kurt Alme. Kurt, before we go, where can folks find you on the internet to learn more about your campaign?
AlmeForSenate.com. We're up and running, and we're going full speed to November.
AlmeForSenate.com. All right, Kurt, we look forward to having you back. Thanks for coming on the Scott Jennings Show, and good luck this fall.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right, Kurt Alme from Montana. I think that might have been his first big interview as a candidate, so we're honored to have him here on the Scott Jennings Show. Take a break. First, a quick word from Patriot Mobile. Now, every day you're making consumer choices that shape the country's future, right down to which cell phone provider that you choose to support. My advice is to support a cell phone company that supports you, that believes in your Christian conservative values. There's only one answer if that's a question for you, and it is Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile, they deliver prioritized premium service on all three major U.S. networks. Switching is easy. You go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT and use promo code Scott. They'll give you a free month. Switching, very easy. Keep your number, keep your phone, or get a new phone, whatever you want. But my advice is get over to Patriot Mobile, because not only are they a good cell phone company, they believe in your political values, and they invest in what you believe in. We're going to take a break. When we come back, talk a little bit about soft-on-crime judges around the country. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Tuesday, March 31st. A note for our listeners in the Cleveland area. We're heading to Cleveland for opening day, Friday, April 3rd, and Salem is setting up right near the baseball stadium on Carnegie for a VIP tailgating event with a company called Indian Motorcycle. And Salem will also be live from Jolene's Honky Tonk later in the afternoon. Now, here's the deal. If you show up over there in your Cleveland Indians gear, not Guardians, you got to show up in your old Indians gear. If you show up, you'll be entered in a contest to win a spot on our Gulf of America cruise, which comes up this November. By the way, the Gulf of America cruise, you go to this thing in Cleveland, you can get entered into a chance to win one, or, you could just book your cabin right now. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's going to be amazing. Mike Gallagher's going to be there. I'm going to be there, Larry O'Connor, and we're going to sail around the Gulf of America. We're going to celebrate the country's 250th anniversary. We're going to see, by the way, it's an amazing ship, the Eurodam. If you're a cruiser, this is one of the best ships. They got great food, and the stops are amazing, the excursions are amazing, the water is great, the beaches are great. If you're going to need a vacation in November, particularly after the election. I know I'm going to need one. And we'll talk about the issues facing the country and exclusive events. There'll be a lot of people on the ship, but if you sign up through us, you're going to get to do stuff with me and Mike Gallagher and others. Here's how you book your cabin. Don't wait. I know you're agonizing over it. I know you're like, I don't know. Should I go on a cruise with Scott Jennings? Should I go on a cruise with Mike Gallagher and see if he really plays pickleball topless on the Lido deck? You should. You should come and find out these things. Here's how you do it. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. Love to see you there. Cabins are going. So text us today, 94878. Text the word cruise, and they'll get you all signed up for the November Gulf of America cruise. Story that caught my attention today out of Minnesota. Do you remember the Feeding Our Future fraud story up there? This was the big, like $250 million. That's how much fraud was in play with this Feeding Our Future thing. Well, a defendant in this Feeding Our Future fraud scheme recently was sentenced to federal prison. Okay, that sounds good. Maybe. Except he was only given 1 year and 1 day. 1 year and 1 day. Now, $250 million in fraud, but this particular fraudster, Abdul Abu Bakr Ali, was only given 1 year and 1 day for his role in all of this. Again, this scheme, the Feeding Our Future thing, was involved. What was involved here was people stealing, including this defendant, more than $250 million that was meant to feed children during the pandemic. You know what I think we're learning this week? When you look at this situation in Florida, this Congresswoman McCormick, she stole $5 million in pandemic relief. These Feeding Our Future people, they stole $250 million. It seems to me we had quite a bit of fraud during the pandemic. 79 people overall in this Feeding Our Future thing have been charged. Most of them were pleading guilty or were convicted at trial. In court on Monday morning, I'm reading now from Fox 9 that's on the case. Abdul Abu Bakr Ali got his sentence, and according to his plea, here's what he did. He used a nonprofit as a shell company to submit millions of dollars in fraudulent reimbursement claims for meals that were never served to children in need. What kind of a deranged, sick person must you be to look at a situation and say, we're going to use hungry children as a cover to set up a fraudulent nonprofit to steal money? And it's like the least honorable thing you could possibly do. He and his co-conspirators, Fox 9 says, used fake invoices for food and services, and they falsely claimed to have provided roughly 1.3 million meals over a 7-month period. They told the government, we served 1.3 million meals. I mean, that's a lot of meals. I mean, the scale of this is breathtaking. He paid a little bit of restitution, it sounds like, but not much. The overall thing was $250 million. This guy's going to get a year in federal prison, and then what? And then what? He gets out, and I guess he gets to re-examine his life? I don't know. I just feel like right now, folks, around the country, we're seeing judge after judge after judge not throw the book at people. I want the books thrown. I think the American people do as well. We're going to take a break. More when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. Stay with us.
Here's Scott Jennings.
All right, Tuesday, March 31st. More politics news, and politics news down in Louisiana getting wild and woolly this primary season. Let's take a deep dive into the race for United States Senate, where the incumbent is Republican Bill Cassidy. Cassidy was first elected to the Senate in 2014 when he defeated incumbent Senator Mary Landrieu. He was the first Republican to hold the Senate seat there since 1883. However, Senator Cassidy has caught the ire and the attention of President Trump because he voted to convict Trump in his impeachment trial following the events of January 6th, and that led President Trump to endorse a primary opponent for Bill Cassidy. Take a listen to this in Cut 14.
I'm thrilled to give my complete and total endorsement to your next United States Senator from Louisiana, Julia Letlow. She's been a friend of mine. She's been loyal as can be. We've had great success every time I've endorsed her. She won, and she's been a great congresswoman.
And joining me now is the recipient of that presidential endorsement. Congresswoman Julia Letlow is here. Julia, welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. It's great to be with you.
Well, it's nice to hear your voice, and I just want to start here. You know, challenging an incumbent United States Senator is not easy, but you have jumped into this race nonetheless. Tell us about your campaign and why you're running for the Senate.
Well, first, it was so incredible to receive President Trump's endorsement, before I'd even made the decision to run for the Senate. That kind of trust means the world to me, something I definitely don't take lightly, and that's the kind of encouragement that it's just impossible to ignore, Scott. President Trump knows he can count on me. Since day one I came to Congress, I've been a reliable America First vote on the issues that matter to Louisiana, like border security, energy, the tax bill, every priority that matters to Louisiana families. And wherever I go, that's exactly what I hear about in Louisiana. So honored that the president gave me his complete and total endorsement. That is, again, something I don't take lightly. And I know he endorsed me because he wants a senator from Louisiana who will advance his agenda without hesitation, one he can depend on, instead of someone who voted to impeach him and then spent the next 5 years trying to walk it back. So I'm running because I know that Louisiana deserves and is wanting a conservative senator who will not waver when the pressure's on.
Tell us a little bit about the Louisiana election system this year. My understanding it's a little bit different than usual. You will have a May primary here, is that right?
That's right. We're running in closed primaries so Republicans can have a strong conservative candidate of their choice. We're used to fall elections. We're used to running in open primaries, but this is different this year. And so it'll be May 16th, and we're trying to just inform everyone that this election is coming up soon, and everybody come on out May 16th to vote.
Sometimes party primaries can be a little uncomfortable inside of states like this, and it's kind of unusual, honestly, for two office holders like this, federal office holders, to be running against each other. I'm kind of interested in the primary dynamics as you're traveling around the state and talking to voters. How are they reacting to the idea of a sitting congresswoman running against a sitting senator, probably two people that they may have voted for both of you in the past?
Wherever I go, and I encountered this, Scott, 6 years ago when I was running for the first time for Congress. Senator Cassidy had just voted to convict the president, and people were irate about that vote. And I heard it wherever I went, every stop, every corner of the state. And I thought, okay, well, there's 6 years from now, maybe that rhetoric will have died down a little bit. It has not. It is the same wherever I go. That is a flaw that you just cannot make. And, one thing, I was never imagined that I would be in politics. I'm not a career politician. I'm an educator at heart. And my late husband, Luke, was the public servant in our family and actually ran for this seat and won it. And then I tragically lost him to COVID 5 days before he was set to be sworn in. But one thing that I did learn from him, just witnessing him serve other people, is that you can't lose sight that you work for the people. This is their seat. It's not yours. And you're there to represent them. And that's what I've strived to do every day that I've been in Congress for the last 5 years. And that's something that I know that the Louisiana people can count on if they will have me in the Senate.
The voice you're hearing, Julia Letlow, member of Congress, running in the Senate primary for the Republicans in the state of Louisiana. Congresswoman Letlow, you mentioned that your background is in education. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think something interesting is going on in education policy in America. It's actually red states that are now leading the way and blue states that are lagging behind. I'm curious about your own education background and your views on this issue.
Well, I'm so proud about what the president and the administration are doing in the education space. For the longest time, I've believed, and as most Americans do, that we need to take power away from the federal government and give it back to the states and local municipalities where it belongs. We know best how to educate our children, not the government. So I have been championing this since I've been in Congress. So was so proud to author the Parents' Bill of Rights. Remember in COVID, for the first time, parents were sitting down with their children and seeing what they were being taught firsthand across this country, and many were not pleased. They went to their school boards to voice their displeasure and then were turned away, rebuffed, and many were even put on a domestic terrorist watch list, which should never happen in our country. And so proud to make sure that that never happens again. Author the Parents' Bill of Rights. We passed it through the House. Would love to continue that work over in the Senate. It died over there. If I'm fortunate enough to make it over the Senate side, would love to codify that And I'm so grateful that the president signed that as an executive order. It was one of his first initiatives to make sure parents always have a seat at the table when it comes to their child's education. But you'll find no stronger advocate for education than me. I believe in education at every level. It is the answer. If you educate a child, you give them a future.
Let's talk about a current event, and it's relevant to your primary because you're in the House and Senator Cassidy is in the Senate, and there is an impasse in Washington right now between the House and the Senate over how to get the Department of Homeland Security funded and back up and running and get TSA agents paid and get our homeland secure, as the name of the cabinet might imply. Obviously, in the House, you all voted late Friday night to fully fund DHS. The Senate voted to fund DHS without the immigration enforcement piece. Maybe talk a little bit about the House Republican position and your own personal position as it relates to what you want to see to get the Department of Homeland Security up and running again. Right now, we are in the longest shutdown of any part of our government in U.S. history.
We absolutely need to get DHS up and running again. I believe the House has passed the DHS bill, 4 times now. We have done our job. It is the onus is on the Senate. I would implore them to make sure to do whatever it takes to fund DHS to get it back up and running. We all saw what happened at the airports with TSA, but Scott, I come from Louisiana. We have natural disasters. We absolutely need FEMA up and running. We need everyone at full capacity. And then when you talk about national security, you have to have DHS up and running. So I would implore the Senate to do what it takes to pass the bill to make sure DHS is reopened. I've actually just signed a letter with the clerk that I will no longer be taking my paycheck as long as DHS is closed down.
That is the voice of Julia Letlow, member of Congress, and she is a Republican candidate for the United States Senate in Louisiana ahead of the May primary. Let's talk a little bit about the other big issue in the world right now, and that is Operation Epic Fury, the United States-Israeli action against the regime in Iran. You're in Congress. You're getting information from the administration. I have 2 questions for you. Number one, are you satisfied with the level of information and briefings that you're receiving from the Pentagon and from the State Department? And number 2, how do you foresee this ending? What is a satisfactory ending to this for you and the people of Louisiana?
I'm definitely satisfied with the briefings that we've received. I trust this administration. I trust the president, that he also has intelligence information that maybe not all of us are privy to at all times. But I know that he is doing everything he can to put America first and make sure American lives are protected. And I have full faith that this operation will move swiftly. That's what we're being told, and will be successful. And then we can move forward from there. So, again, fully trust the administration, the president, to make the best decisions. And he has been successful in the past. I know this will be successful as well.
For you, what do you need to see to consider this to be a success? Is it, do we have to be able to say we got all of the enriched uranium? Do we have to be able to say 100% we can assure the world that this regime does not possess the capacity or the material to make a nuclear weapon? Is that at the top of your list of desires to call this a successful engagement?
I think that's at the top of every American's list, that they should not have the capability to make a nuclear bomb. I mean, that's what we've been saying for years. And that's what it's going to take to make American citizens safe. So I think if you polled most Americans, including me, we want to make sure that they do not have the capacity to build a nuclear weapon.
Let's talk about the economy and what you voted on last summer in Congress. The Republicans passed the Big Beautiful Bill, which did offer a lot of tax relief to average working class Americans. I'm curious, as you move around out there in this campaign, are people talking to you about that? We're hearing from the Treasury Department that average refunds are way up, that a lot more Americans are getting a refund, getting more money than they expected. Is this coming up to you from voters in your conversations?
They are. Wherever I go to speak and also listen to them, they're excited about their tax returns this year. We've been saying it. Republicans have been screaming from the rooftops. Just wait till April. You are going to see a huge return, and that's going to be so helpful when we talk about things like affordability. And there were so many wins in that bill because it was so large that just being able to remind them no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, something that's really important to me as 100% pro-life is that we were able to defund Planned Parenthood. That is huge for Louisiana, especially for my pro-life population down here. So just amazing wins all across the board, and I'm excited to share the good news wherever I go in Louisiana.
Congresswoman Julia Letlow, running for the United States Senate. Tell the people how to get in touch with your campaign. Where do they find you online?
JuliaLetlow.com.
Simple as that. Julia Letlow from Louisiana. Interesting primaries down there in Louisiana. We'll be tracking all of that as we go throughout the spring. Appreciate your time with us on the Scott Jennings Show today.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
All right, Julia, talk to you soon. After the break, we're going to round out the show with some basketball news. Wokeness still infecting the NBA. Sage Steele will be here to discuss what happened with the Chicago Bulls and a player they released. I do want to give you a quick word from the IFCJ, as we've been discussing for weeks now. Operation Epic Fury is raging, and in the Holy Land, this means that if you're there, you're hearing red alert sirens almost every night as these missiles continue to rain down on innocent civilians. Now, I've been there when this is going on. I was there last summer. When these things go off, you've got about 15 seconds to get into a bomb shelter. I know how it works. And at times like these, freedom and faith aren't just abstract ideas. They are absolutely what we depend on to get us through these long, dangerous nights. And also in times like these, we depend on the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews because they are on the ground. They are preparing large-scale distributions of life-saving food and emergency essentials for people who are in hospitals and shelters. They keep all of these places stocked with critical supplies. Israel's most vulnerable, they need the fellowship, and the fellowship needs your prayerful support. I'm asking you to join Christians and Jews around the world in praying for the protection of Israel right now. Stand with Israel. Go to supportifcj.org. Supportifcj.org. Finish up the show here in just a moment with Sage Steele. Stay with us here on Salem. I'm Scott Jennings. Don't go anywhere.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Tuesday, March 31st, rounding out today's show, hoping to get Sage Steele, famed sportscaster, on the line here in just a few minutes. The issue I wanted to discuss with Sage is that the Chicago Bulls have waived their point guard, Jaden Ivey, following videos he posted where he ranted or talked about religion and other topics, including calling out the NBA for celebrating Pride Month. Now, the Bulls announced this move on Monday, and they said it was conduct detrimental to the team. Ivey, in this video, called out the league on Monday morning. He called the celebration of Pride Month, quote, unrighteousness. Now, he has been posting other videos with other views in recent weeks. He's 24 years old, by the way. Ivey, in his latest video, said, quote, I'm going to quote from the video here, "The world can proclaim LGBTQ, right? They can proclaim Pride Month in the NBA. They proclaim it. They show it to the world. They say, come join us for Pride Month to celebrate unrighteousness." And joining me now to discuss all this and the fallout from it is Sage Steele. Sage, I appreciate you joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show. What do you make of this situation? Can you think of another case where a professional sports team has waived someone from the roster for espousing a cultural or religious view?
Not off the top of my head, Scott, and it's always awesome to see you. Thank you for having me on. My first reaction was, what? The NBA, it's woke. Here we go again, but this time it's at another level. And I think that's the easy, probably natural reaction, especially based on the NBA's history. However, I do think that we have to start with the facts. And yes, the facts are what he said. It was certainly anti-LGBT. It was also anti-Catholic. He said several things that could be offensive to many people. And that's where the subjective part comes in. Sometimes it's difficult. It's like, okay, just because I'm offended Does that mean you should be offended or not offended? We've seen this so many times. At the end of the day, the NBA and these teams, which are separate, right? It's the league, the teams themselves that have ownership that can make any decision they want. The Chicago Bulls made this decision, conduct detrimental to the team, which is a very big phrase, something that they can truly hide behind in many ways, right? It is their right to say, you know what, we don't like what you're saying. That's their right. I experienced that in many ways at ESPN and Disney. I think the question is, and the question I have, and the issue I have, is the lack of consistency throughout the NBA. When you have coaches, you have Greg Popovich for years, who's crushed President Trump and called his voters cultists, right? When you have Doc Rivers, when you have Steve Kerr, people that I've known for years and respected in many ways, who are, they're allowed to say anything, Scott. We know that. But then when one person says something on the other side, you're out. And I think the lack of consistency is the issue here.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of coaches and some players have used their position to espouse a lot of political views. And also we've had a lot of players who have done things in their personal lives that, could be offensive to some fans, whether it's, engage in violent acts or engage in criminal activity and so on and so forth. And although, I don't know a lot about the personal background of Mr. Ivey, I tend to agree with you. It does seem to be some amount of uneven treatment. What do you make of the fans online who have wondered about Mr. Ivey's mental health? I saw Seth Davis, the college basketball analyst, question that. Do you think that's an unfair attack, or do you think that's a fair conversation to have about him?
I think if you do your homework, all of us, right, as we put out judgments here, cast judgments, there are some questions maybe to ask if you dig deeper into him as a human being, instead of just casting a wide net over the whole thing. He has been public over the last year about some of his struggles, having been sexually abused when he was a child and even been involved in some domestic violence situations with his now wife that come from anger from his childhood. I mean, I love that he's been open about it, and he's been open about his come to Jesus over the last year as well, which is not something we should be celebrating. And hey, you can go deeper into this and say, well, if he has these mental issues, some of the things that Coach Billy Donovan has talk to him about, these struggles, should they be helping him more? Should they be using those NBA resources to help him instead of saying, you know what, goodbye, peace out? I think that's a very fair question, and we're still learning details about this. I will say this, and this is where the people I believe on X and so many of us who are upset. Look at LeBron James, Scott. Look at LeBron James and what he said in 2021, right? About you're next for a police officer who had shot someone else. And so when you say you're next, as if, hey, you should die next, cop, and then that's okay, and there's no repercussions for him, that's the issue that I agree with.
That's Sage Steele. I'm Scott Jennings. We're done for the day. See you later, Sage. Appreciate you hopping on, and we'll see you tomorrow on The Scott Jennings Show.